Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties, from Keweenaw to Monroe, Chippewa to Berrien, brought to you by the Michigan Association of Counties.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to our Podcast 83, the only podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. I think it's been a couple weeks since we've done one of these, and we're back to a little bit more of a recorded format, but still a lot of things to update. A lot going on since our conference. We want to make sure everyone's in the loop on some important pieces of legislation. We've got our Michigan Prosperity Roadmap that's been finalized that we talked a little bit about at our conference, and Deena's going to provide some more information on that. Megan's going to talk a little bit about our jail population webinar being put on by NACO. That was actually some work that was first done here in Michigan and now being branched out to other states across the country. And then some federal legislation we want to make sure everyone knows about as well. So with that, Deena, why don't we start with four-year county commissioner terms? Obviously an important piece of legislation we've been talking about for a long time. Why don't we give a quick update on where we're at with that?
We'll just start right out with good news, why don't we? Thanks, Steve. So yes, we've been working on four-year terms for county commissioners for quite some time. It's been part of our agenda for at least two legislative sessions, if not more. Senator Moss and Senator McBroom have introduced Senate Bills 242 and 245. They passed out of the Senate with an overwhelming majority, and they are now in the House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee. That committee is chaired by Representative Julie Kelly, who last year took the bills up in her Elections Committee and passed them out. So the good news is she's got those bills scheduled for a committee hearing this week, Wednesday at noon. And of course, we will be there, jumping up and down in full support. Both senators will be there to testify on the bills. We've got Jim Story from Allegan County, who is going to testify remotely. He's been an excellent champion for this issue, so he'll be there to provide testimony. They don't expect a vote this week, though. They're going to take up the bills, talk about them, and then next week I do anticipate a vote out of committee. We look pretty good. So then we'll try and put a push on to get it done before the end of the year.
Yeah, so great opportunity to reach out to your House members that may be on that committee. Like Deena said, most are in support, I believe. Thank them for their support. Oftentimes we're telling folks, tell them to vote no, tell them this is bad. This is an opportunity to thank them for doing something positive for counties, because I think that's oftentimes goes overlooked. So thanks for that, Deena. That's some great news.
We do have a phone to action campaign out there on it too. So go to our website, take a look at that. The talking points are there. Any information you need, if you need more than what's there, just give me a call and we'll talk about it. But the more you can engage, all of the House members, the better.
Right, and these are Senate bills, so these are out of the Senate now. They're on the House, so we're coming through the final stretch here that we want to keep momentum going, and hopefully, like Deena said, get these done by the end of the year. Megan, you want to talk a little bit about this NACO webinar, talking about the jail task force that we were a part of a few years ago and now kind of getting some legs nationally?
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like forever ago when we say 2019, but this started really in 2019 with the launch of the Michigan Joint Task Force on pretrial incarceration and jails. Pew Charitable Trust came in and really launched a state and county partnership looking at our jail populations among the state and coming up with some recommendations that the legislature then took a look at really throughout 2020, even throughout shutdown and pandemic situation, and actually had some change in state policy that really affected who's sitting in our jails. So legislation dealing with alternatives to arrest, probation issues, driving without a driver's license suspension. So maybe reasons why you would not be able to drive and go to work and make money to pay certain fees and fines. And sometimes that didn't really make sense if it was an issue that you're arrested for that had nothing to do with driving impaired or something like that. So some things that the laws changed really affected how our jails operate. And now is being recognized nationally. NACO actually came in, talked to Pew Charitable Trust, and reached out to us and asked us to talk about how this all started and what sort of assistance was provided, how counties and the state really rallied together on some of these things. And so that's going to happen on Thursday at 1 o'clock. There's a registration link on the NACO website, and I'll be on there. Former county commissioner out of Kent County, Jim Talon, who served on the task force, will be joining as well and talking about his experience. So we're excited about it, and it's really exciting to see Michigan recognized at this level.
Yeah, a lot of great work came out of that task force, and really transformational from a jail perspective in our state on some of the work that was done, and great work by Jim and all those folks on that committee to get that work done. And we're always thankful to Pew Charitable Trust when they want to come in and help us out with things like that. So great partnership there, and thanks for that update, Meghann. And speaking of transformational, see what I did there? That nice little segue.
That was a good transition.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting good at this now. ARP funds, something we've talked about a lot at our conference. Deena mentioned it, the budget, deputy budget director mentioned it, this coalition of folks we've put together to look at the state's portion of the ARP funds, not necessarily our portion, but the state's portion. And we have the Michigan Prosperity Roadmap that is out there now. Deena and Meghann, I know you guys both worked on subcommittees of this coalition. You guys want to talk a little bit about, maybe provide a little more detail? We don't want to get too far into the weeds, but just some little more detail on where we're at with that whole proposal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So like Steve said, we put together, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but a large coalition of, local government, philanthropy, environmental groups, business groups, utilities, and really try to come up with a proposal that bridged the gap between the legislature and the governor, that sort of took into account everybody's interests, not just local government interests, but large, community-wide interests. So that plan was developed. It asks for about $5.7 billion of the state's money. That's about how much they have left that they didn't allocate in their fiscal year 22 budget. And that ask was made public a couple of weeks ago. Steve Currie, nice job on the press conference. He detailed out, the fiscal health and stability portion of that plan. We've got other parts of that plan include infrastructure, water infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, housing and workforce development, economic development, and then public health and safety. And I think it's been very well received thus far. I think you got good coverage in the media, Steve. The whole coalition did. We have many meetings set up with the legislature, governor's office, state budget office. And so far, so good. So far, so good.
I think it's being well received because, as a lot of county commissioners have heard too, from all of these groups that are coming out of the woodwork, as all of this money is coming in, the state legislature has been hearing that as well. And, when you have hundreds and hundreds of asks, it's really, I think, refreshing to have such a large coalition come in with a plan and, hey, this is what we really think will be transformational. We recognize this is a one-time opportunity. And so I think that the time spent, the meetings that we had for months on this really is being recognized and well received.
Yeah, Deena, is the details of the plan on our website, or did we send those out last week? I don't remember.
Yeah, we've sent links out to the details of the plan. We've done some articles on it. We talked about it, in previous podcasts as well, but we'll say it again. It's www.miroadmap.com. That's where you can go to see the website that was created by the coalition, and it has all the details in it. Now, that being said, we want you to read it. We want you to understand it. We want you to advocate for it. I think everyone is going to find things in there that they really support. And it's not just, single issues. So I think that that's one of the reasons it's also being well received, is it just a variety of interests. It's probably going to change a little bit. Okay, we've got, numbers out there assigned to each individual proposal. Some have match requirements and some don't. Some could be grants, some could be, reimbursements for things. Understand that this is, the framework that we put together, but it's not enacted yet. We've got to talk about timing. We've got to talk about, some of the details in that plan. And all of that has not been yet worked out. So
Right,
go
yeah,
there and learn it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get both chambers to agree to a final plan, the governor's office. So there's still some work to be done. Now, that being said, I know we're pushing as hard as we can to get it done sooner rather than later, right? We don't want people just sitting on these funds. And if there's a potential match opportunity out there, we want that available sooner rather than later before people start making decisions locally on projects that they might be able to get assistance for statewide. So
Yeah, I know you're out there all the time, right? You're talking to these counties and
mhm,
they're like, they want to make a plan for their funds, right?
right, right.
But we want them to, hopefully get match money for it to extend it further. So really pushing the timing in Lansing is important.
Well, there
And-
always seems to be changes too, right? I mean, we still have discussions at the federal level with changes to this money. So I think, again, just all reasons why our members need to kind of take it back and keep having conversations in the community, but make sure that they're really understanding all of these different things that are happening at the state and federal level and how to spend their money.
Yeah, and speaking of changes at the federal level, see, Megan's even getting in on the segue game here. Good job, Meghann. We have a piece of legislation that really passed quietly out of the Senate last week, unanimously voice voted out of the federal Senate. It's the State, Local, Tribal, and Territorial Fiscal Recovery Infrastructure and Disaster Relief Flexibility Act. I don't know.
Do you have
That's a
the cheat
mouthful.
sheet in front of you, Steve?
No, I
You
memorized it.
wrote it on the palm of your hand.
I've been memorizing it all night, just making sure for that moment I could.
Usually they have good acronyms, and I don't think that's a good acronym for them.
No, I think everyone's just going to refer to it as Senate or S 3011. So, yeah, really interesting piece of legislation with regards to ARPA funds, what it would do, and Deena and Meghann chime in on this as well, because there's multiple components of it. I know that would it be if you essentially up to $10 million of your ARPA funds would be considered revenue loss. So basically, if you got less than $10 million, your entire ARPA distribution funds could be considered or would be considered revenue loss if you chose to do so. For those counties that received more than $10 million, obviously up to $10 million, plus on top of that, if they had a calculation of revenue loss, could be used as revenue loss. And why that it's important is that obviously the revenue loss calculation, when you're looking at these ARPA funds, provides the most flexibility at the local level for use of the funds. You're not restricted by expenses, specific expenses. It's essentially general fund dollars with some slight restrictions, but not like if you're using it for COVID related expenses.
Mhm.
On top of that, there's a transportation piece as well, transportation infrastructure piece. So up to 30% of your funds could be used for transportation and infrastructure purposes. And there's definitions in there what those purposes are. But the question always gets asked, could you use these for roads or bridges or dams and things like that? And yes, you could. So up to 30% could be used for that purpose. There's also some disaster relief components, no caps on that. The funds could be used for disaster relief. That's more for some of the obviously southern counties or southern states and counties that have had hurricanes, wildfires, those sorts of issues. So really interesting legislation. Like I said, passed unanimously out of the Senate. It is now on the House floor. We will be sending a letter of support for that legislation. The main reason being because it does provide the most flexibility at the local level to use those funds. And while there is the interim final rule out there, still a lot of confusion on what funds can and cannot be used for. And there's a lot of apprehension out there at the local level and state level, I think, to a certain extent, on how the funds can be used. So if the revenue loss calculation does this go forward, that affects almost half our counties. Would all their funds would be essentially revenue loss. So pretty important piece of legislation there. Did I miss
Yeah.
anything?
No, I think that's the gist of it, but obviously, I think devil's in the details on all of this and what's interpreted and what gets changes by Treasury. So there will probably be more to come as this, potentially passes the House and we get more details on it.
Right. All right. Well, that's all the topics we had this week. Deena, Meghann, any closing thoughts?
Go green. Big weekend.
week.
Go.
Deena's got her green
Good
shirt on.
job.
Big rivalry game this weekend. College game day, Fox's big noon show. Everyone's coming to East Lansing. So if anyone's around, we'll probably see you out around tailgating. So have a great week, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83, brought to you by the Michigan Association of Counties.